My name is Alex. I'm 28, live in a pretty standard suburban town a couple of hours outside of a major city on the East Coast. My life is pretty normal, work a desk job, hang out with friends, try to convince myself I should go to the gym more often. The biggest constant in my life, besides my slightly too nosy parents, is my older brother Ben. Ben is 32. We've always been close, typical brothers, fought like hell as kids, became each other's best friends as adults. He's always been the more laid-back one, easygoing to a fault sometimes. Never really had much trouble in the dating department, but he also never seemed to find someone he wanted to settle down with. He'd have relationships that would last a few months, maybe a year, then they'd just end. No big drama, just a quiet fizzling out. He never seemed too broken up about it, which honestly used to worry me a little. I wanted him to find someone who made him genuinely happy, who stuck around. Then, about 3 months ago, he met Sarah. He met her through some online dating app, the kind everyone uses now. He mentioned her casually at first, just, "Hey." Went on a date, she was nice. Then it progressed to going out with Sarah again. And then pretty quickly, she was just around. Like, always around. It wasn't a slow introduction. One week I hadn't even heard her name, the next she was at our parents' house for Sunday dinner, awkwardly smiling and making small talk. My parents, bless their hearts, are usually pretty at making anyone feel welcome. But even they seemed a little reserved around her initially. Not in a mean way, just maybe slightly unsure. And that was my first hint that something was maybe not entirely right. It wasn't anything she did specifically. She's conventionally attractive, polite, quiet. She says the right things, smiles when expected, nods along with conversations. On paper, she's perfect. Ben is clearly smitten, like, really smitten. I haven't seen him this happy, this absorbed by someone, maybe ever. He looks at her like she hung the moon. And that, in itself, is part of the weirdness. Ben has never been one for grand gestures or overly sappy romance. He's a practical guy. But with Sarah, he's different. He's more attentive, almost excessively attentive. Like he's constantly trying to make sure she's okay, constantly seeking her approval or attention. Okay, so let's talk about Sarah herself. What is it that feels off? It's subtle things, initially. Things I tried to brush off as just her being shy, or maybe a little socially awkward. But they've started to accumulate, and now they feel less like quirks and more like deliberate choices. Her eyes. That's the first thing I noticed, subconsciously. They're a really striking pale blue, almost gray. And they're beautiful, objectively. But when she looks at you, it feels less like she's seeing you, and more like she's scanning you. Like she's processing data. There's a flatness to her gaze sometimes, a lack of warmth that doesn't match her polite smile. I've caught her staring, not just at Ben, but at me, at my parents, at objects in the room, with this incredibly intense, unblinking stare. It lasts just a second too long, and it sends a little shiver down my spine. When I try to meet her eye directly, she usually looks away quickly, her smile fixed in place. Then there's her voice, It's soft, almost a whisper sometimes. She speaks in incredibly measured tones. Never raises her voice, never uses slang or contractions. It's almost unnervingly formal. Like someone who learned English from a textbook and hasn't quite grasped the nuances of casual conversation. But she grew up here, Ben said. She's lived in this state her whole life. It doesn't add up. Sometimes when she's talking, I get the weirdest feeling that she's repeating phrases she's heard elsewhere rather than expressing her own thoughts. It's like she's mimicking conversation. Her movements are also precise, economical. She doesn't fidget, doesn't make unnecessary gestures. She sits with perfect posture, stands perfectly still. When she walks, it's a smooth, gliding motion. It sounds silly, I know, but try picturing someone who moves like a perfectly programmed robot. Not stiff or jerky, but too smooth too. Controlled. Like every movement has been calculated and rehearsed. It's unsettling. The first time I really felt this strongly was maybe 2 weeks after I first met her. Ben invited me over to his apartment for pizza and a movie. Sarah was there. Of course. We were sitting on the couch, me on one end, Ben in the middle, Sarah on the other end. We were watching some action movie. Explosions and gunfire filling the room. Ben and I were reacting, laughing at the cheesy one-liners, flinching at the loud noises. Sarah just sat there, perfectly still. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, but her expression didn't change. No jump, no laugh, no wince, just watching. It was like she wasn't processing the information emotionally at all. Like she was observing an experiment. During the movie, Ben got up to get more drinks. As soon as he was out of the room, the air in the room seemed to change. It became heavier, quieter, despite the movie still blaring. I glanced over at Sarah. She turned her head very slowly towards me. Her pale eyes met mine, and that blank, scanning look was there. It felt like she was seeing right through me, past the surface level Alex into something deeper, something I didn't want her to see. I felt exposed, vulnerable. And then, just as slowly, discovered why. She turned her head back to the screen. Her expression remained neutral. The entire interaction couldn't have lasted more than 10 seconds. But it felt like an eternity. When Ben came back, she was smiling politely again, the moment gone as if it had never happened. But I felt it. I felt the coldness behind the smile. Another incident happened a few weeks later. My parents were having a small backyard BBQ. Ben and Sarah were there. My mom has this really old, slightly beat-up bird bath in the garden. It's been there forever, a little chipped and stained. But she loves it because her grandmother gave it to her. Sarah was standing near it, looking at it with that intense, unblinking stare. My mom went over to talk to her, made some comment about the bird bath and how old it was. Sarah just nodded, her eyes still fixed on it. Then, in that quiet, measured voice, she said, "It requires maintenance to prevent decay." My mom just kind of blinked at her. "Oh, well, yes, I suppose it does," she said. A little awkwardly. "But it's more about the sentimental value, you know." Sarah just gave that polite, empty smile. "Sentiment is a fascinating variable in material preservation," she said. It wasn't just the strange phrasing. It was the way she said it. Like she was reciting a definition from a science textbook. My mom just kind of trailed off the conversation after that. She gave me a look later. A raised eyebrow that clearly said, "Isn't she?" A little odd. Yes, Mom. A little odd is putting it mildly. The weirdness isn't just her behavior, though. It's also how she seems to not interact with the world in a normal way. For instance, she doesn't seem to have any hobbies. When people ask her what she likes to do, she gives vague answers about observing or learning. Learning what? She doesn't read books, doesn't watch TV shows, other than sitting through the ones Ben watches with that blank stare, doesn't listen to music. She doesn't seem to have any friends outside of Ben. Ben says she works from home, some kind of data analysis, but he doesn't seem to know much about it either. It's all very undefined, and her knowledge base is bizarrely inconsistent. Sometimes she seems incredibly knowledgeable about obscure topics, like the tensile strength of different types of metal, or the migratory patterns of birds in a completely different hemisphere. Other times, she seems to lack basic common sense, like not knowing how to boil water, or being genuinely confused by sarcasm. Discovered why. It's like she's downloaded vast amounts of information, but hasn't processed how it applies to everyday life. Then there are the little things that really start to gnaw at you. I was over at Ben's place helping him move some furniture. Sarah was there, sitting quietly on the couch, watching us. At one point, Ben dropped a heavy box on his foot. He yelped, hopping around in pain. I rushed over to see if he was okay. Sarah didn't move, didn't make a sound, just watched him, with that same blank, observing gaze. No concern, no empathy, nothing. Ben brushed it off, said he was fine, probably just bruised. But I saw Sarah's reaction, or lack thereof. It was chilling. I tried talking to Ben about it, casually at first. "So, Sarah seems quiet, huh?" Ben just shrugged, smiling. "Yeah, she's a little shy at first, but she's amazing, Alex. You'd really like her if you got to know her." "I'm trying, man," I said. "But she seems a little, I don't know, detached." Ben's smile faltered slightly. "She's just introverted," he said, maybe a little too quickly. "Not everyone is as loud and outgoing as you and me." "It's more than that, Ben," I pushed gently. "Doesn't she strike you as a little different?" He sighed. "Look, Alex, she's not like anyone I've ever met. And yeah, maybe she's a little quirky. But she's kind, she's smart, and she makes me happy. Really happy. Can't you just be happy for me?" And that's the thing. I want to be happy for him. He's my brother. His happiness is important to me. But this feels wrong. This doesn't feel like normal happiness. It feels like he's under some kind of spell. Or maybe he's just so desperate for this relationship to work that he's blind to the weirdness. The weirdness is escalating, though. It's no longer just subtle behavioral quirks. Starting to feel predatory. A few nights ago, I was leaving Ben's apartment after visiting. I said goodbye to Ben, and Sarah was standing by the door. As I turned to leave, she reached out and lightly touched my arm. Her hand felt incredibly cold. even through my shirt. She didn't say anything, just gave me that same unblinking stare, that faint, polite smile. It felt like a deliberate gesture. A claim of territory, perhaps, or maybe a warning. It sent a jolt of pure fear through me. I pulled my arm away, maybe a little too quickly, and just muttered, see ya," before practically jogging down the hallway. I know this all sounds crazy. Maybe I'm imagining things. Maybe I'm jealous of Ben's happiness. Or maybe I'm just not good with new people. But this feels different. This feels wrong. Like she's wearing a human suit that doesn't quite fit. Like there's something ancient and cold and calculating hiding behind those pale eyes and that polite smile. I don't know what to do. I can't convince Ben that something is wrong. He's too deep in it. My parents are starting to notice the oddities, but they just attribute it to her being eccentric. They haven't seen the coldness, the detachment, the lack of humanity that I'm starting to see. I feel isolated. I feel like I'm the only one who sees it. And the more I see, the more afraid I become. This isn't just a weird girlfriend. This feels like something other. Something that has its sights set on my brother. And I have no idea how to protect him, or myself, from it. This is getting long, and I need to process all of this. I'll try to add more details as things happen, or as I remember more specific incidents. Has anyone ever dealt with someone like this? Someone who feels fundamentally wrong? Please tell me I'm not going crazy. The fear hasn't subsided. If anything, it's a constant hum beneath the surface of everything I do now. Since that incident at Ben's apartment when Sarah called him a valuable subject, my anxiety has been through the roof. Sleep offers little respite. My dreams are filled with pale eyes and cold touches. I keep replaying every weird interaction, every unnatural movement, every oddly phrased sentence. They feel less like isolated incidents and more like pieces of a terrifying puzzle I'm slowly, reluctantly, putting together. Ben is definitely getting worse. Not just the physical cold he had, which lingered far longer than a normal cold should, but something else. He looks tired, even when he says he's gotten enough sleep. His usual easygoing nature is gone, replaced by a nervous energy and a defensiveness I've never seen. He snaps at me sometimes if I ask too many questions, even innocuous ones about his day. And he talks about Sarah constantly, but not in a way that sounds like a guy happily in love. It sounds more like an obsession, or like he's trying to convince himself how perfect she is. He's also started adopting some of her strange habits. I was over at his place briefly the other day to pick something up. Ben was sitting on the couch watching TV. But he wasn't really watching it. He was sitting perfectly still, with that same blank, unblinking stare Sarah uses. He wasn't reacting to the show at all. Just sitting there like a statue. It was horrifying to see my vibrant, expressive brother mimicking her eerie stillness. When he finally noticed me, he blinked rapidly a few times like he was coming out of a trance and forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, Alex, didn't see you come in." "Yeah, just grabbing them." I trailed off looking at him. "You're okay, Ben, you seem spaced out." His smile tightened. Fine, just tired. Long day. Right, I said, not believing him for a second. Listen, Ben. Have you noticed anything different about yourself lately? His eyes narrowed slightly. Different? What do you mean? I'm happy, Alex. Happier than I've been in a long time. He said it with too much intensity, too much forced cheerfulness. I know you say you're happy. I pushed gently. But you seem tired and quiet. You're not acting like yourself. He stood up abruptly. Maybe this is myself now. Alex, maybe you just don't know me as well as you thought you did. His voice was sharp, defensive. It wasn't the Ben I knew speaking. It sounded rehearsed, like Sarah's conversation. He walked towards me, and as he got closer, I noticed something else. His skin looked pale, almost translucent in places, and his eyes looked duller, not as bright as they used to be. Look, he said, his voice lowering slightly, but still with that edge. Sarah makes me happy. She understands me in a way no one else ever has. You don't need to worry about me. But I am worried, Ben. That's why I'm saying this. This isn't you. He took a step back, his posture stiffening. It was Sarah's posture. I think you should go, Alex. It hit me then, with sickening clarity. He wasn't just influenced by her. He was becoming like her. Or maybe she was slowly replacing him, or changing him into something else. I left, the conversation ringing in my ears. It was clear I couldn't reach him through direct confrontation anymore. He was too far gone, too deeply under her sway. I knew I had to find out more about Sarah, even if she had no digital footprint. There had to be something. I started thinking locally. Where would someone like her come from? What would her life have been like before meeting Ben? Ben said she'd moved here a couple of years ago. Where had she lived before? He didn't know, or wouldn't say. I spent hours scouring local news archives online, missing persons databases, anything I could think of, using different search terms, women fitting her general description, who moved to the area around that time. Any odd incidents reported that might somehow connect to her. Nothing. It was like she materialized out of thin air. Then I had a thought. Ben had mentioned she worked from home, doing data analysis. Could I find anything about her employer? Ben didn't seem to know the company name, just that it was remote. I tried searching for remote data analysis companies, cross-referencing them with potential addresses in the area. Even though she worked from home, maybe a company headquarters existed. It was a needle in a haystack. Defeated, I decided to try a different angle. What if I tried to observe her directly, more closely, without Ben knowing? A couple of nights ago, I drove over to Ben's apartment building. It's a standard 3-story walk-up. His unit is on the second floor. I parked down the street, far enough away not to be noticeable, but close enough that I could see his windows. I felt like a total creep, sitting there in my car in the dark. But the alternative, doing nothing, felt even worse. I watched his windows for a long time. Lights were on inside. I saw Ben walk past the living room window a few times. I didn't see Sarah. This wasn't unusual. She often stayed in another room while Ben did things. Hours passed. It got late. The lights in Ben's apartment stayed on. This was weird. Ben usually went to bed by 1 p.m. on a weeknight. It was past 1 a.m. I was about to give up when I saw movement at the living room window. It was Sarah. She walked to the window and just stood there, looking out. She wasn't looking at anything in particular, just scanning the street below with that familiar, unnerving gaze. She stayed there for a long time, perfectly still. It reminded me of a security camera panning slowly, except it was a person. A person who didn't seem to need sleep. As I watched, something truly disturbing happened. A small moth fluttered against the outside of the window, attracted by the light. Sarah's eyes locked onto it. Her head tilted slightly, just like a bird observing prey. Then, slowly, she raised one hand towards the window. Her fingers twitched slightly, and the moth stopped fluttering. It just clung to the glass, perfectly still. It was like she had frozen it with her gaze, or with some unseen force. She kept her hand raised, her fingers still, and her eyes fixed on the motionless moth for several minutes. There was an intensity in her gaze that went beyond mere observation. It felt hungry, analytical, yes, but also predatory. Then, just as slowly as she raised it, she lowered her hand. The moth remained still for another second. Then, suddenly began fluttering frantically against the glass again, as if released from an invisible hold. Sarah watched it for a moment longer, then turned and walked away from the window, disappearing back into the apartment. I sat there in my car, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt cold sweat on my back. She did something to that moth. I saw it. It wasn't a trick of the light, wasn't my imagination. She exerted some kind of control over it. What else could she control? Was that what she was doing to Ben? Controlling him, like the moth. And if she could do that to a living creature, what was she capable of? I couldn't stay there anymore. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming. I started my car and drove home. The image of the frozen moth and Sarah's predatory gaze burned into my mind. I didn't know what to do. I had seen something impossible. Something that confirmed my worst fears. Sarah wasn't just strange. She was something fundamentally other. Something with abilities that didn't belong in the natural world. I spent the next day in a state of near panic. I called Ben again, needing to hear his voice, needing to make sure he was okay. He sounded tired, but said he was fine. Sarah was there. I could hear her voice faintly in the background, saying something I couldn't make out. It sounded like static. I made a decision. I had to go over there. I had to see Ben, talk to him face to face. Try one last time to get through to him, or at least see for myself what state he was in. And maybe, just maybe, I could find something in that apartment that would give me a clue about what Sarah is, or where she came from. I told Ben I was coming over that evening. He sounded hesitant, which was unusual, but eventually agreed. He said Sarah would be there. Of course. Walking up to his apartment door felt like walking into a trap. My hands were shaking as I raised my fist to knock. I half expected the door to open by itself, revealing Sarah standing there with that unnerving smile. Ben opened the door. He looked worse than I'd thought. His eyes were sunken, his skin even paler. He looked exhausted, almost gaunt. But he smiled a strained, unnatural smile. "Hey Alex, come on in." I stepped inside. The apartment felt cold. Despite the normal temperature setting on the thermostat, the air felt still, heavy. Sarah was sitting on the couch, in her usual perfect posture. She didn't stand up or greet me. She just turned her head and those pale eyes fixed on me as I entered. The polite, empty smile was there. But this time, I saw something else in her eyes. Something calculating. Something that recognized me as a problem. "Hello, Alex," she said, her voice soft and measured. "Sarah," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I looked around the apartment as I walked in. Everything was meticulously neat, almost sterile. Too neat for Ben's place. On a small side table I saw a notebook. It was open. As I passed it, I caught a glimpse of what was written inside. It wasn't words. It was diagrams. Complex, intricate diagrams filled with symbols I didn't recognize. And beneath them, numbers. Lots of numbers. And some phrases that looked like technical jargon. One phrase caught my eye, written clearly at the top of a page. Subject 7, Integration Log. Subject 7. Ben. My blood ran cold. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This wasn't a relationship. It was an experiment. I must have made a sound, or maybe my expression changed. Because Sarah's head snapped towards the notebook. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Her polite smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure, cold alarm. "Ben," she said, her voice dropping to a low, urgent tone I'd never heard before. "The log." Ben's head whipped around. He saw me looking at the notebook. His eyes went wide with panic. "Alex, don't," he yelled, lunging towards the table. But Sarah was faster, with a speed that was utterly inhuman. She was off the couch and at the table in an instant. Her hand shot out, closing over the notebook. As she grabbed it, her sleeve rode up slightly. And I saw it. On her forearm, just above her wrist. It wasn't skin. It was something else. Smooth, grayish, with faint lines that looked like seams or plating. Like artificial skin. My breath hitched. I backed away slowly, my eyes fixed on that glimpse of unnatural material. Sarah clutched the notebook to her chest. Her chest rising and falling slightly faster than normal. The only sign of anything resembling distress. Her eyes, fixed on me, were no longer blank. They were filled with a cold, intense fury. Ben stood frozen for a second, looking between me and Sarah. The panic on his face was quickly replaced by something else, a fierce, protective glare directed at me. "Get out, Alex," he said, his voice flat and hard. "Now." "Ben, you don't understand. Look at what I saw," I pleaded, pointing towards Sarah. Sarah took a step towards me, the notebook still clutched in her hand. The air in the room seemed to vibrate with suppressed energy. Her eyes narrowed. "He is not your concern, Alex," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Your interference is undesirable." I was trapped. Ben was staring at me with hostility. Sarah was advancing. And I had just seen undeniable proof that she wasn't human, and that my brother was her subject. I knew I had to get out. But I also knew I couldn't leave Ben here. Not like this. As Sarah took another step, I saw her other arm move slightly. Not towards me, but towards Ben. A subtle gesture, almost a command. Ben's expression changed again. The hostility faded, replaced by that familiar, vacant look. He turned away from me, towards Sarah, his posture slumping slightly, looking completely compliant. Sarah's gaze was locked on me. "This unit's integration is proceeding," she said, her voice returning to its measured, chilling tone. "Further observation is not required. Disengage. Disengage." Like I was a faulty drone. The meaning was clear. I was a threat. And she was telling me in her own terrifying way to leave. Or else. I glanced at Ben. He was standing there looking completely passive. His eyes fixed on Sarah. He was gone. Lost to her. I backed towards the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. Sarah watched me, a terrible, knowing look in her pale eyes. I fumbled for the doorknob, my hand shaking uncontrollably. "Leave," Sarah repeated, her voice barely a whisper. But it filled the room. "No." I turned the doorknob, pulled the door open, and practically fell out into the hallway. I slammed the door shut behind me and ran, not stopping until I was in my car and driving away from that building as fast as the speed limit allowed. I don't know what I just saw. I don't know what Sarah is. But I know she isn't human. And she has my brother, and she knows I know. I'm shaking as I write this. What do I do now? She's dangerous. And Ben. Ben is gone. Whatever she's doing to him, it's working. He chose her over me, over himself. I saw the log. Subject 7 integration log. She's integrating him into something. Changing him. And I think I just put myself in her crosshairs. I don't think she'll just let me disengage. A fleeing Ben's apartment was the most primal instinct I've ever followed. My mind was a jumble of terror. The chilling sight of that non-human skin on Sarah's arm. The glimpse of the Subject 7 integration log. Ben's vacant eyes and hostile words. It wasn't just fear for myself. It was a gut-wrenching horror at the realization that the brother I knew was gone, replaced or controlled by it. I drove home on autopilot, my hands clenched white on the steering wheel, my heart still hammering against my ribs. Every car behind me felt like it was following. Every shadow seemed to shift and lengthen. I pulled into my apartment complex parking lot, but I didn't feel safe inside my own home. The feeling of being watched, which had been a persistent anxiety, was now a certainty. Sarah knew I knew, and she had directly threatened my interference. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark living room, the blinds pulled tight, a kitchen knife clutched uselessly in my hand. My logical brain tried to reassert itself, telling me I was being ridiculous, that it was just a misunderstanding, that I was overreacting to a bad argument and a weird glimpse of skin. Maybe a birthmark. A scar. But the cold dread in my gut, the memory of Sarah's utterly inhuman speed and her cold fury, and the words, Subject 7 and integration log, screamed the truth. She wasn't human, and she was doing something to my brother. What did she mean by integration? What was she integrating him into? The diagrams and numbers in that notebook. Were they charting his transformation? His assimilation? The thought was so monstrous, so sci-fi horror, that it felt impossible. But I had seen the proof. The next day was a blur of panic and indecision. I wanted to call the police, but what would I say? My brother's girlfriend is an alien roboto monster who is turning him into a subject, and I saw fake skin on her arm. They'd think I was insane. I thought about calling my parents, but they only saw her as eccentric. How could I explain the horror witnessed without sounding completely unhinged? They'd just worry, or worse, try to intervene themselves and put themselves in danger. I was on my own. Ben was gone. And I was in danger. I tried calling Ben's phone multiple times that day. It went straight to voicemail. I texted him, trying to keep it casual at first, then pleading. No response. It was like he'd vanished. Or like Sarah had confiscated his phone. The silence was deafening. It confirmed my fears. He wasn't just mad at me, he was unreachable. That evening, things escalated. I was still holed up in my apartment, trying to think. There was a faint scratching sound at my front door. It was quiet, deliberate, like fingernails on wood. I froze, the knife back in my hand. Hello, I called out, my voice trembling. The scratching stopped. Silence. Then, a soft, measured voice, barely audible through the thick door. Sarah's voice. Alex, we need to speak. My blood ran cold. How did she know where I lived? Ben must have told her, of course. But the way she found me, the scratching, it felt less like a normal visit and more like something waiting. I didn't respond. I just stood there, frozen, listening. Your presence is a disruption. Her voice continued, still soft, still devoid of normal human inflection. Continued disruption is inefficient. Not annoying. Not dangerous. Inefficient. Like I was a bug in a system. Open the access point. Alex, she said. Access point. Not door. I pressed myself against the wall, away from the door. My heart was pounding so hard I felt like it would explode. Silence again for a few moments. I could feel her presence on the other side of the door. A cold, waiting stillness. Then, the scratching started again. More insistent this time. And then, a low, unnatural scraping sound. Like something hard was being drawn along the wood of the door frame. Slowly, deliberately. It wasn't a key. It wasn't a tool I recognized. It sounded like something sharp was being used to test the barrier. Panic seized me. I didn't know what she was capable of, but the moth incident, the artificial skin, she wasn't playing by normal rules. This wasn't a jilted girlfriend showing up at the door. This was something else. I backed away from the door, scrambling towards my kitchen, towards the window. I had to get out. As I reached the kitchen, I heard a faint click from the direction of the front door. And then, the doorknob slowly, silently, began to turn. She wasn't just knocking. She was getting in. I didn't hesitate. I threw open the kitchen window, fumbling with the screen, tore it open, and scrambled out onto the small fire escape landing. I didn't even bother closing the window behind me. I scrambled down the metal steps, my movements clumsy and loud in the sudden silence. I hit the ground running. not looking back, not daring to see if she was at the window, watching me. I ran through the parking lot, past the dumpsters, out into the street. I didn't know where I was going, just that I had to get away. I didn't stop running until my lungs burned and my legs ached, putting as much distance as possible between myself and that apartment. I ended up at a brightly lit 247 diner several towns over. I sat in a booth in the corner, nursing a cold coffee, trying to regain some semblance of control. I was a mess, shaking, sweating, breathing heavily. People stared, but I didn't care. As I sat there, the full weight of the situation crashed down on me. My brother was gone, potentially being fundamentally altered by this thing, and the thing knew I was a threat and was actively pursuing me. I was alone, with nowhere to go, no one who would believe me. I pulled out my phone, my hand still shaking. I had a dozen missed calls and texts. Some were from my parents, worried because they couldn't reach Ben or me. But one caught my eye. It was an unknown number. No caller ID. I hesitated for a long moment, then opened it. It was a text message. Just 3 words. Integration cannot be disrupted. No sender name. No way to reply. Just that chilling message sent directly to my phone. She wasn't just at my door. She was everywhere. She had my number. She knew where I was. Or maybe she didn't need to know in the conventional sense. Maybe she had other ways of finding people. My mind flashed back to the moth, frozen in midair. Her subtle control. Was she doing that to Ben on a massive scale? Controlling his thoughts, his actions, integrating him into what? A collective. A new form. I knew I couldn't go back to my apartment. I couldn't go to my parents' house. That would put them in danger. I was a fugitive in my own life. What about Ben? Could I save him? After seeing the log, seeing his vacant eyes, seeing her capability, I didn't know if there was anything left to save. She wasn't just influencing him, she was transforming him. And he seemed to be a willing participant, or perhaps no longer capable of not participating. The thought gnawed at Meg, what if Subject 7 wasn't the first? What if she, or things like her, had done this before? Was this an isolated incident, or was it part of a larger process? I didn't know the answers, and I was terrified of finding out. I stayed at the diner until dawn, watching the windows, jumping at every sound. I didn't feel safe anywhere. Sarah felt like a presence, a consciousness that could extend its reach far beyond physical proximity. I haven't contacted anyone since. I'm living off the grid as much as possible, staying in cheap motels far from home, paying cash, turning off my phone for hours at a time. Every time I turn it back on, I brace myself for another message. Another threat. I tried searching online again, but this time for anything. Anything that might relate to unnatural phenomena, strange disappearances, anything that echoed the horror I'd witnessed. I found forums dedicated to cryptids, conspiracy theories, unexplained events. Nothing specific to a Sarah or an integration log. But the sheer volume of stories about things that don't fit into the normal world only amplified my fear. It made me feel like I had stumbled into a reality far larger and more terrifying than I could comprehend. I check Ben's social media occasionally, under a fake name. There are no new posts. His profile picture, a photo of him smiling broadly, looks like it belongs to a ghost. My parents have posted worried messages asking if anyone has seen him. No one has. He's just gone, integrated. I don't know what Sarah is. I don't know her purpose. But I know she's here or things like her are. And I know she took my brother. And she knows I'm still out here, a loose end. I feel her presence sometimes. A cold awareness at the edge of my perception. It's like she's patiently waiting, observing, knowing that eventually. Why? All variables are contained. All disruptions are eliminated. I don't know how long I can keep running. I don't know if there's anywhere safe left for me. I just know that the woman my brother fell in love with wasn't a woman at all. And whatever she is, it's still out there. And it knows my name. This is the last time I'll be posting. It's too risky. If she can send texts to my phone, she can probably track me through this account. I just wanted to get this out there in case something happens. In case someone else sees the pale eyes, the blank smile, the precise movements, and feels that same cold dread. Maybe my story can help someone else recognize the signs before it's too late. For now, I'm just trying to survive. Trying to stay one step ahead. Trying not to think about Ben or what he's become. And trying not to look out the window at night. Because I have a feeling, sooner or later, I'll see those pale eyes staring back.